more minutes. I'm gonna wait till everyone gets on the stream. But you know, we had to talk about this fight, man. Let's just talk about this fight in its entirety, right? So, like I said, give me about like 30, 40 more seconds. I'm gonna wait till everyone gets in. A good start. I think we're pretty much almost good to go. We got about 100 people in here already, so really don't need too much of a wait time. But what up, Raul? What up, Steven? What up, Juan? What a fight. Definitely fight of the year so far. Yes. I love the positivity. I love it. I think us boxing fans, we debate and argue about everything, but this is probably one that we can all coincide and agree with, right? So, all right, cool. Let me cut the intro off and we get straight into it, y'all. What up? Squid Ink Pasta says Ron needs to put his pants on. What's up, man? I got pants on. What you talking about? What up, Ace? Peace. Corey Lee Boxing in the building. It's ice season. What's up, bro? All right, man. Let's just get it out there right now. We've already been talking about it all last night or in the morning, depending on where you guys are at. I mean, is there really a debate for Fight of the Year candidate? Before I even got in the stream, I went back and watched the Kinshiro fight, the unification of flyweight, because, you know, that was a good fight back then. You know, I think it was a couple months ago. And I seen it resurface on Twitter on debating what's Fight of the Year. And it was a good fight. But I think we can all agree from the storyline to the build-up to the rivalry, the animosity. It kind of first, I'm not going to lie, it kind of first felt kind of like a gimmick, right? You got two sons of two legends, you know, two former champions that had a rivalry. And it almost felt like it was manufactured in a way because these guys were not in the same weight class. These guys haven't accomplished, you know, major world titles. And you know, it just kind of seemed like, let's just get the Eubank and Conor-Benn name together and just make a quick buck, especially when they're not in the same weight class. But after you look at it, hindsight now, with the failed drug test, the egg slapping, the rehydration clause, to missing the weight, to the fines, to everything, to Eubank's dad calling him a disgrace and not wanting to be, you know, attending or participating in the fight, to him showing up at the fight, to it being an all-out war, which became almost like a nail biter at a point, right? I think at somewhere along the line, we all thought either one or two. Chris Eubank was just clearly more experienced and bigger, and he was going to dominate the smaller Conor-Benn after he kind of looked subpar in his previous fights against Pete Dobson out in Vegas. Or he was going to take advantage of the older fighter who had struggled to actually make the contracted weight and had to be forced into a rehydrated clause, which many people were like, well, he's made 160 before. Yeah, he made it before, but he's older. He no longer fought at 160 pretty often, and plus the rehydration. I mean, we already know. So, at the end of the day, I think both fighters end up being compromised to what made pretty much what was almost an even fight into the last couple rounds. I thought Chris Eubank was in control for most of the fight. You know, there was moments where Conor-Benn had closed the gap, right? I think maybe there was a point in time where Conor-Benn switched to going to the body and started to hurt Chris Eubank until Chris Eubank turned around and was like, all right, look, we're going to make this a fight. And if you want to go there, I'll take you there. So, Morale Lost Get Over It says Puerto Rican boxing is dead. Why do you say that? Why do you say that? I mean, Matias is about to fight for a world title. Again, he's about to fight Alberto Pollo. You know, Turkey already wanted a rematch. Turkey Milkshake thinks these fighters are action figures, SMH. You know, all right, so I pretty much just went into the good, right? The segment's called The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, right? And I think the good was everything what it became. It almost felt like a WWE scripted event, right? Every possible outcome that could potentially happen of this is a war, an epic fight that went 12 rounds. Both fighters got hurt. You know, the fathers showed up. It became everything and more than what we probably expected from what we considered a gimmick. Now that's the good. I think the bad. Let's see, bruh. I'm a troll. Don't take me serious. Okay, that's fair. Um, I think what would I? Because I know what the ugly is, right? I'm gonna just. Um, the bad might be just simply the fact that maybe there isn't bad. Maybe it's just good and ugly, right? The good, it was an amazing fight, crazy storyline. The ugly, right? The ugly, I think, is that the fact that this was more of like a novelty fight, in my opinion, because really at the end of the day, outside of their name, right? Outside of their name, there was really nothing meaningful outside of that, right? You know, the fight itself was, a young, hungry, youthful, inexperienced fighter facing an older, they were both compromised. An older fighter who was clearly more experienced, but looked a little bit slower, looked a little bit, not in his prime. And really, to be honest, it starts to feel like this might be a potential Canelo Alvarez fight later in his 4-fight deal with Turkey because of the fact that, Chris Eubank is a huge name now in British boxing. He was already, but after a performance like that, at a setting like that, I mean, I can see Canelo fighting Eubank after Crawford, out in the UK, and that would probably do crazy numbers. So, especially if they do a rematch and Eubank wins again. But really, at the end of the day, the fight itself, when you really look at it, there was technical flaws amongst both fighters, which made it a great fight, right? Most times coaches always say they don't want you to be in the fight of your candidate. Kenny Drake, what up? Fight of the year so far is Tank Roach and then Eubank-Benn. Yeah. I mean, look, I think Marcus says better than Pacquiao and Mayweather. When it came to entertainment, pure just entertainment, raw value of just two guys fighting each other, right? And not being like a boxing purist, I would agree so, right? I mean, from the second the first round started, it looked like Chris Eubank got rocked. It looked like either the first or second round. I mean, they were throwing some serious punches. Conor Benn was throwing some serious rights. Chris Eubank was leading with a lead check hook. And those guys were definitely fighting for the most part. Eubank would try to control the pace at times by using a jab. But then Conor Benn just made it a dogfight, and then Eubank answered back. So I think for the most part, I think these two guys may not benefit fighting each other again. And I think that's the ugly part of this, right? Both fighters showed a lot of grit and heart for sure. I think that's the ugly part about this. I think the ugly part is knowing that these guys took a lot of damage. Conor Benn had to fight a guy that's so much bigger than him. And you even saw in the 11th, 12th round, I mean, you kind of thought Conor Benn was actually going to go. Like, he was taking some serious punishment at that point. And, Eubank, who had been sent to the hospital, confirmed, I don't think, a broken jaw. But, they said he's okay. But, he sunk down. His body was sunk down to a weight where his self probably can't maintain that for a long period of time. And he did it the first time. He made the initial weight when the fight fell out to show that he could do it. He did it now for the second time. And so granted, him doing it a third time and maybe a short turnaround later this year, has to recover, has to make that weight again, which he didn't make. He didn't make 160 exactly on the dot. And, put his body at a state of being dehydrated and going to war again. I don't know, right? Like, you start to worry about that. And then, like I said earlier, Conor Benn fighting a bigger guy. That's pretty much it. You know what I mean? I think myself is just let Chris Eubank go off and fight somewhere around his weight class for a lot of money, right? I think I said it earlier, Canelo has a good taste of getting these fights where it may seem easy in a lot of matchmakers' eyes, but a lot of opportunity, a lot of money. I think Eubank Jr. Canelo would be huge out in the UK. And then give Conor Benn an opportunity to fight for a world title. I mean, he showed that he's able to hang in there with tough, durable guys with a lot of heart. I think Mario Barrios fight would be competitive. I think I think Brian Norman would be an interesting fight. I would stay away from the Jaron Ennis fight because personally I think Jaron Ennis would be even a harder fight than the middleweight that he just faced, just because of the prime that Jaron's in and all the skill sets and talent. I mean, I don't want to see that. But maybe if Jaron moves up in weight. So Ben was throwing haymakers. Eubank looked sluggish on his throws. Yeah, he did. He looked very slow. He looked compromised for sure. I mean, they're both compromised, but he looked like he was at any moment a punch could have probably like took him out. It felt like you were on the edge of your seat thinking potentially like Conor-Benn could land a one and then get Eubank out. There was a couple moments where he looked slow and sluggish, and when he got rocked, you thought he was going to go. Let's see. Conor-Benn needs to save his energy in the early rounds. I think he's just always had an issue with late round stamina. Early in his career to even the Pete Dobson fight, right? I covered that fight out in Vegas, and Pete, was putting on Conor-Benn, and it made me question a lot about Conor-Benn after that fight. So the fact that he was able to perform this way, even with a compromised Eubank, was impressive to me. But I think a lot had to do with the family pride. The family pride took this fight to another level. It was bigger than a world championship fight in their eyes. And so now, they really went deep into that well and that darkness, that place where you don't really go too often, right? Even a world championship fight might not even bring you there. This was pure family pride. They were clearly willing to put everything in that ring. I mean, these two guys were exhausted by the end of the fight, and I give him all credit to that. But I think he's always had energy conservation issues, and you saw it by the end of the fight. Conor-Benn was definitely struggling, just like the Pete Dobson fight as well. Conor-Benn got him back for that egg. Eubank may have won the fight, but he broke his jaw. Great Gambino, what's up, man? Yeah, they never really confirmed, so it could potentially. I just know his promoter, Ben, was saying that he was okay, but didn't mean like his jaw wasn't broken. It was kind of like the Ali Frazier, right? Ali might have won the fight, but he probably took a lot. It took a big beating in the Frazier trilogy, and I think Eubank definitely paid the price. Yeah, Eubank don't have a broken jaw. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. That's what Conor-Benn said, but then Ben was out there on Twitter earlier mentioning that he's okay. So, I was shocked how calm Ben took that loss. I got respect for him now. I mean, there's not really much what he can do. Like, what's he going to do? Like, throw a tantrum? I mean, I think really at the end of the day, I think it was just more pain. I don't think it was calmness. I think it was just pure pain. You saw it in his eyes. I think it would have been the same result of Eubank, because these guys really took, like, the family name to heart. Like, they wore that on their trunks. They tattooed it in their heart. Like, they really took their family name and ran with it. And so to continue that legacy that they took, and this isn't Britain too, right? Like, obviously in America, it wasn't probably as a spectacle over there, but this is like Ali Frazier, Holyfield, Tyson, right? If you had the children of royalty of boxing like that, like Floyd Mayweather and Pacquiao had kids, and then they go fight each other, right? I mean, that's kind of what Tank and Ryan Garcia was, right? Kind of like, these are the students or the face of the promotional company of Oscar De La Hoya and Mayweather, right? And that's why that fight was so huge, because it was almost like these are the children of Floyd and De La Hoya. So, I think it was just a lot of pain, especially knowing the fact that the Benns came up short in the Eubank series, and I know that the second fight was extremely controversial, and many people felt Ben should have won the second fight. I truly think that that's just what it was. The fact that he just was like, I couldn't avenge the Ben name. Like, the Eubank-Benn name remains the loser of the Eubank series. And so he didn't want to disappoint his father. They've had a great relationship. You know, it wasn't tumultuous or had issues like Eubank and Senior. Like, they had really bad family issues. And it clearly showed when they were reunited at the fight. So because of it, I think that's just really what it was. I think maybe a shock of pain, and maybe that's why he took it so well. You know, that was very heartbreaking to see, but the right person won, you know. Now we know what's next for Canelo Eubank. Yeah, I mean, I'm just speculating, but there's two ways to look at it. He goes to William Skull, then he fights Crawford. If he loses to Crawford, I would heavily favor Canelo to beat Eubank Jr. You know, Eubank just doesn't look like a top 168 fighter, right? I mean, even if you gave him the rehydration, like, there was still defensive flaws. He looked sluggish. I mean, even if you didn't remove his weight issue, I think Canelo fighting Eubank Jr. would be a great comeback fight if he lost to Crawford. And granted, if he was able to beat Crawford, and they did by any chance set up a Eubank-Conor-Benn rematch, what other big fights can Canelo make outside of David Benavidez or the winner of Arthur Beterbiev, you know, him going up in weight? There's really not a lot at 168. He's already fought Mugia. He's already fought Edgar. He's already fought Plant. I mean, there's really nothing much more that he can do outside of going up to 175. And if he fights Crawford and win or lose, I think taking the fight out into UK, Eubank Jr. would be a great money-making fight. And they were already talking about making that fight for years. So it wasn't something that has just come to fruition now. Because of that, they were already talking about making the fight prior to the Conor-Benn fight. So I think it was always in the play, and I think this just made the fight even bigger. I know there's a lot better fights at 168 that Canelo can make for the boxing fans, but at his point of his career, I just don't think he's looking for that. So Eubank don't have a broken jaw. It was just because of exhaustion. I mean, you know, they were in a fight. You know, Michael, they were in a very tough fight, and I'm sure that they both went home with a lot of damage. I'm pretty sure, you know, there was a lot of downtime that these guys are probably soaking in ice baths and laying in bed and just trying to recover, because, I mean, they both got hurt in that fight. Now, right, that was a fight. Leon and Eubank rising up. Holyfield's a legend. Yeah, I agree, Mr. Quake. Devin Haney would have sued the whole family if he lost that fight. Chill out, bro. What up, the shit? What up, the ish? Yeah, can't wait for you. Mean this week? Yeah, so this week we will be going live for all three. Devin Haney, Canelo, and Inoue. I mean, it's a big boxing weekend. And I'll be out in New York. I'm going to take a trip out to New York for a little bit of the week to do some coverage, to check out, you know, the festivities. Great game. I had it a draw at first, but rewatched it, and Eubank got that one. Not by a lot, but he won that one. Yeah, I think it was something where when I first watched it, I didn't watch it again. I thought it was very easy to score for Eubank. Clearly, it wasn't an easy fight for Eubank, but I think it was an easy fight to score. Because I think when you really look at it, he controlled a lot of the first half with his jab, right? You know, he was controlling the pace, and then Conor-Benn later changed the tempo, right, by being a little bit more aggressive and having some success mid-round. But every time it felt like Ben was starting to get momentum, Eubank would then, you know, extend the gap that he was already having. Like, I thought Eubank was winning, Ben was catching back up, then Eubank was winning, then Ben was starting to go to the body, and then Eubank closed the show. So I always felt like Eubank was always the horse leading the pack. He was always the one that was always ahead of the scorecard. And when it finally went neck and neck, because Ben had to play catch up, Eubank will come back and then make the adjustments. So there was a lot of adjustments in the fight that these guys made. And you can clearly see by the end of the fight, Eubank went from the boxer to the brawler. You know, Ben went from, you know, trying to box with him to fighting with them, to, instead of headhunting, going to the body. So there was a lot of game plan adjustments, and Eubank was just the one who had the early lead. So, smoking that Conor-Benn pack. Boys be crying. PED cheat got smacked when an egg whooped and lost his O. Yeah, I mean, it's very obvious that something happened. I mean, the British Boxing Board clearly never went in depths. Neither did Eddie. So unfortunately, it's so vague that I can't even speak on what exactly was the reason why he was not penalized in that. But yeah, I mean, PED cheat got smacked with an egg, whooped, lost his O, crediting his daddy arms. Damn. Canelo's ducking. I mean, come on, bro. Nobody's trying to fight him. Even David Morrell lost to him in the amateurs, bro. Ain't nobody trying to fight him. That boy's a beast. They both took some damage. Great fight, though. Looking forward to this week. Yeah. And I just kind of like ending on the Conor-Benn and Eubank situation is I think the fight was a great one and done. They're probably going to do it again. The money's probably insane. Turkey says that they've already have a venue and date and everything situated. And just so you guys know that if they do the rematch, it would be exactly the same terms as the first one. Conor-Benn would fight at 160. Chris Eubank would have to make 160 with the rehydration clause of nothing more than 170 the following day. So ultimately, I just feel like someone's seriously going to get hurt the second time around. And I think that even though the first one was so amazing that you feel like they have to do it again, I think the second fight's going to have kind of like a similar effect how Corrales and Castillo did, where the first fight was so great that you had to see it again, but the rematch never lived up to it because of the simple fact that these guys took so much punishment from that fight that there's no way that both fighters will come in there and be able to produce another 12 rounds. It's clear as day, especially when they're both compromised. They're both compromised, which many people feel, oh, that's fair, that's even. But Eubank is taking punches at a dehydrated weight, and Conor-Benn is taking punches from clearly a bigger man and a more experienced fighter, right? Like, you can tell Eubank was a lot more experienced. Just Nigel Benn was a lot more Conor-Benn was a lot more explosive. You can see his youthfulness, his eagerness to want to jump all over Eubank. I mean, it was just young lion versus old lion, while old lion just couldn't pull the trigger as well as we've seen before, but it was still there. And, you know, you just saw this smaller guy just getting pummeled by it in an 11th, 12th round. It's just, I personally really rather not see it again. You know, I just rather not see it again. I just see someone getting hurt. And strange enough, as much as I thought Eubank won the first fight comfortably, I feel like Eubank could get hurt in the second fight. Only because of the fact that the point of him in his career, he's already been in a lot of fights. He's already been knocked out before. He's already took a lot of punishment throughout the years. And I feel like Eubank might get the short end of the stick if they had to come on the same terms again. While Conor-Benn might go back, make certain adjustments. Clearly, if he went to the body earlier, like he did in the later rounds, it took a toll on Eubank and forced Eubank into a firefight. But Conor was gassed out by that time. So I think if he went to the body earlier, but I picked Eubank to win the fight, but I didn't think the fight was going to be like that. So going into the second fight, seeing what I saw, even though I had Eubank winning, I might favor Conor-Benn just because of the potential risk that Eubank is putting himself again. Like, remember, this was kind of like a fight where Conor-Benn was kind of the guy who was supposed to be set up to avenge the family name and move on to bigger and greater things. So you kind of felt that Eubank Jr. was kind of the B-side in a sense, who kind of had to fight against all the adversity. What up, Mr. S? Went out to eat on his birthday. Bars. Let's say it's the most likely to be the Shakur versus... really? Where'd you hear that from? Is that on Twitter somewhere? The fight was the same age gap of Nello and Triple G. Really? That's quite amazing. And you know how the first fight was able to produce something, even though the second fight also produced even a more difficult fight for Triple G. It gave Canelo a better case in the second fight that he won the fight. And by the time they fought the third time, I mean, it was why even make the fight? That was stupid. So, Eubank needs to retire now on a high. He is shot. Yeah, he looked compromised. Like a lot more compromised than Conor-Ben did. And I know that he went up in weight to fight the bigger guy, but Eubank just didn't look right, And Eubank on a bad night was enough to beat Conor-Ben if there was no rehydration clause and they were able to just fight at whatever the case. And I mean, I think Eubank would have did some serious damage on Conor-Ben. The boys are both warriors on the highest order. Oh, for sure, Ash. Like, I have nothing negative to say about any of them. I think the only negative thing that I do have to say is outside of, like, I don't want to see a rematch because of the potential risk that they're putting their bodies and their life at. They didn't really show the defense that I wanted. I'm a picky, boxing critic when it comes to guys where you can clearly see that there's room for improvement when it comes to defense. And I stress defense a lot. Conor-Ben was just winging at points, leaving himself wide open. And just fundamentally, it just was kind of like a fight where, as entertaining it was also frustrating to see the strategy and the performance that they were putting on. Heart, 100 out of 10. Defense, like a 6. Offense, probably like an 8.5 or 9. Guts, glory, pain resistance, 50 out of 10. You know what I mean? So it's like, I was always told from trainers that as much as we love fight of the year candidates, as a fighter, you never want to be in a fight of the year because they take so much out of your boxing career. So anytime someone's like, yo, fight of the year, to me, I'm like, there's room for improvement dramatically. Unless these are like Hagler Hearns or Leonard Hearns. I mean, that's at a point where at peak, I mean, these are just two guys at their prime, just going at it. And it's just, it couldn't get any better than that. Ali and Frazier and stuff like that. So even Ali Frazier won. Ali wasn't at his, peak. He kind of took the fight, not in the best shape coming from the war. So I think knowing what I saw in that fight, these two guys was clearly not in the best position. And so, I think defense. I think Eubank, with his experience, could have used better defense. He could have made the fight a lot easier. And, Conor-Ben, there's a lot to improve. There's a lot of improvement in Conor-Ben that can be done. Conor's 28, Eubank's 35 was the same as Triple G and Canelo. Eddie Hearn is the king of taking L's. Would be cool if Conor-Ben Eubank Jr. kids would continue trilogy. Oh my God, I couldn't even imagine that. If Barrios and Pac-Man happens, Barrios must stop Pac-Man. No excuse if he doesn't. I'm concerned for that fight too because I know as Pac-Man and Barrios has looked kind of subpar as a champion. He's been picked on as like the weakest welterweight. But remember, Pacquiao didn't have enough. He was training for Spence. In his mind, he's getting ready to train for Spence. So when he fought Ugas, I know styles, and it was a style difference, a style change like that. So that could have laid a factor into the case. But Pacquiao couldn't beat Ugas. Mario Barrios dominated Ugas. I know Ugas came off of the Spence loss, so he was kind of damaged goods from that point. So I get it. It's not like Barrios fought Ugas right after Ugas beat Pac-Man. But, you can't underestimate Barrios. He's a big guy compared to Pacquiao. Pacquiao came up from minimal weight. Barrios was big at 140. He's technically big for 147. So he's fighting still a big, strong, durable, punching welterweight champion. So, and then we also saw, just like Poole said, Pacquiao got pieced up in the exhibition out in South Korea. So you kind of just start worrying about Pacquiao's health and safety. And it doesn't matter. When you look in history all the time, Sugar Ray Leonard came back and he got stopped by Hector Camacho. Ali came back and got stopped by Trevor Burbank and Larry Holmes. These guys that continue to come back in their later 40s, or even back then when, they weren't able to compete as long. But Bernard Hopkins, when he fought Joe Smith Jr., Mike Tyson looked terrible against Jake Paul. Even then, later in his career, against like Lennox Lewis, like Evander Holyfield getting stopped by MMA guys. Like, you just don't want to see it. But these fighters always find a way to do it. And if he does come back and fight Barrios, I just wouldn't be surprised if Barrios was actually able to beat Pacquiao. Like, I just wouldn't be surprised. It's just, if Jeff Horn was good enough to beat Pacquiao, which I know was very controversial, but even to be competitive at that time, Pacquiao was like 45, 46 or some shit. Like, dude, we got to learn how to let this shit go, man. That's kind of where I'm looking at, like, Eubank. Like, he's kind of getting to a point, early, young guy, but he's in a career where fighting younger guys is always going to be dangerous, especially when he's putting himself in a compromised position. Eubanks was countering all night. Yeah, Eubank clearly was the guy who was on his back foot and fought well. And when he needed to fight on his front foot and had to make the adjustments, he got the better of Conor-Benn in the later round. So, that's just experience. Eubank is clearly a lot more experienced fighter. He's fought world champion, Billy Joe Sanders. He's been in there. I mean, he knocked out, the dude that Canelo fought a lot easier. I mean, at the end of the day, dude, he fought George Groves. Like, he's fought a lot more elite competition. So by the time this came around, no surprise Eubank was able to show his veteran tactics against the younger, smaller, aggressive, strong Conor-Benn. Some beautiful shoe shine style combos late on by Eubank. Ben couldn't block anything after the 10th. Yeah. At that point, Eubank was letting his hands go. He was busier. He was hitting the better combination. And I just didn't really think it was any controversy who won the fight. I think we all in agreement that we enjoy the fight. It was definitely fight of the year candidate without a doubt. But yeah, Eubank definitely won it. Pretty easy to score. The problem with these lads is their dads wouldn't let them box when they were young. Not much amateur schooling. I agree, Ash. I know there was this I don't know if you saw it on Twitter, but the video was resurfaced about the footage when Lennox Lewis and a young Chris Eubank Jr. was in like a living room with Senior, and they were talking about how much like Eubank Jr. was talking about how much he wanted to try it, and Senior was talking about how much he didn't want him, and then Lennox was kind of encouraging the idea that, look, obviously we don't want our kids to be in a car crash, but is that gonna be the reason why, like, you don't give them a car then? Like, you're not gonna have them drive a car? So obviously, Eubank late in his life, 15, 16, started boxing, which we all know when it comes to boxing, a lot of these people at the elite level started boxing at a way younger age with a lot more, hundreds of amateur fights with all different styles. And even the ones that even make it to the top of those type of big major marketed fights are like silver medalists, gold medalists, flown around Pan Am games. Like, they have accomplished multiple national championships or something in their country, So Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor-Benn clearly was learning on the job. And, Conor-Benn especially, I mean, I didn't even think Conor-Benn was even going to make it this far. Like, early on, Conor-Benn, when I was watching him, I thought it was going to be, and there's no shot at Ricky Hatton's son. But Campbell Hatton was just another product of a person who had an opportunity to be something because, the family name means something in the world of boxing. But I just thought Nigel Benn's son, Conor-Benn, was just going to be like a Campbell early on, only because you saw how much punishment he took. And defense was always been one of his biggest issues. And I just didn't think he was going to make it this far. So Eubank and Ben, they both have overachieved what a normal boxer who started late in their career is capable of doing. And the last thing too to keep in mind is that not only the fact that they were lacking experience from the amateur scene and they were put on like the pedestal really fast, but that was a very like huge night, not just for them but boxing, because of what it meant for British boxing. And like there was like 67,000 people in that arena, And there's American fighters now that haven't fought above a crowd of 40,000. So to be able to perform and fight and not shell up and quit in front of a huge crowd like that, that's very nerve-wracking. And so, like, you can tell that these people were almost determined that no matter what would happen, they were going to be a natural fighter. I know it's not world championship level of fighting, but the mentality is world championship, you know, if that makes sense. Like, the skills hasn't matched their contemporaries. Like, I'm sure if I put Conor Benn against Jaron Ennis, Jaron will school him. If I put Chris Eubank against Canelo, Canelo will school him. Just my personal opinion. That's just my personal opinion. If the fight happens, we'll see. But my personal opinion, I think they would be the ones to lose those fights. But fighters like that, where they come from, you know, sheltered background, want to get into boxing and yada yada, they typically are considered soft, and they don't really have the ability to take that type of rugged pressure. Those two guys, they fought in front of that huge crowd like they were just comfortable, and they were like clearly meant to fight on the stage, on the big stage. So props to both those guys. Comeback of the year so far. Comeback of the year so far goes to Gary, Antoine, Russell, Thurman, depending how Haney, Garcia ends. I think comeback of the year for sure definitely will be a bigger case for Thurman and Haney. I think Gary, even though he lost to Pacquiao, was still a competitive fight. But I think the Rio Venezuela fight was kind of catered to him to potential, because there was a guy that fought at 135, came up at 140. He's been stopped before. So I think based off Thurman and Haney's situation, I think Thurman has a bigger mountain to climb fighting Tim Tszyu after the long layoff. He's fighting a big guy. Probably could win that fight. And then Haney, obviously, the stuff that goes on with Haney. So, you know what? I don't know. Maybe at the end of the year, I'll revisit that statement, you know. Because everyone thinks Gary Antoine is the best fighter at 140. A lot of people think that. So, yeah, I called it. Pacquiao stops Boots. All right, angry casual fan. The only reason Chris and Conor was close because of the weight in the claws. Yeah. Pacquiao beat Thurman afterwards, though. He did beat, like 6 years ago. That's the thing, Mo. Like 6 years ago. And so for me, it's kind of like almost like we're getting close to like, what? If they fight this year, that's over a half a decade ago that Pacquiao beat Thurman. I want you to remember that. And Billy Iglesias and Boogeyman 168, they keep feeling Ulysses undefeated Roche. I think Ulysses is the real Boogeyman. But Billy's a good second. Gatekeepers like Senna Becco, yeah. Yeah, Ulysses destroyed Senna Becco. Kind of getting tired of the trilogies. Yeah, this is like the year of rematches and trilogies. It definitely is a little exhausting, but I get it. I mean, that's just what they feel like is necessary to determine who is the better of the two. Super fights will happen next year if guys as Haney, Boots, and Garcia do their second fight this year. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think this year is definitely a year of like building into a super fight year. We had a couple super fight years, especially like with Crawford and Spence and Ryan and Tank and Devin and Loma. Like, we had a really good year. David versus Plant, David and Boo Boo. Like, that was a really good year. Like, that's probably one of the best years in boxing in recent times. So, so maybe next year might be a year like that. But this has been an okay year so far, you know. We'd like to see UK fighters be in a mix with US fighters and US fighters in a mix with Japanese fighters. I mean, unfortunately, with Japanese fighters, a lot of them are smaller weight classes. And a lot of the better smaller weight classes are, you know, fighters from Asia. You know, there isn't really a lot of good American fighters in the smaller weight classes. Typically, like Hispanic and Asian countries that dominate smaller weight classes. So, and there isn't really a lot of big Asian, you know, fighters out there. But the ones that are out there, I mean, we're going to see Brian Norman fight in Japan. You Zilly Zhang, might be fighting someone notable. And yeah, it's not really like a lot of, I mean, you'll see Filipino fighters, but I don't know if there's any really Filipino fighters that are in bigger weight classes that are doing really well. So, and when it comes to smaller weight classes, the only American that I think that can be in the mix with all the Japanese fighters and Asian fighters would be Bam Rodriguez. Bam is the one that could be in the mix, and if he can get in the mix with like Nakatani and Inoue, or maybe like a Stephen Fulton and those guys like that, but for the most part, I think the Japanese fighters and the Asian fighters are pretty much dominant, and they fight amongst each other pretty often, unless there's other good Hispanic fighters, like the Chocolatitos, the Estradas, and fighters like that emerges from there. So, but all right, y'all, I just wanted to just hop on, make like a super quick, easy stream, man. I just couldn't go through the week not talking about this on a live, and so I just wanted to just give my 2 cents. Great fight. The good was an amazing fight, amazing storyline. It felt like a gimmick, but hindsight now, I mean, it was one of those spectacles where you're like, wow, they had all the right components where people are still able to talk about the ring walk, where Eubank was coming out to his dad's old ring walk song, and then the reuniting the fathers, and then even the moment when they all got in the ring, this moment of Eubank and Ben, who used to hate each other, like they were kind of like, "What's up, mate? And, our son's about to duke it out. Let's have a good night and just enjoy ourselves." And after the fight was over, Senior went over to Ben, and you can see him praise him, and even at the post conference, like as much as Ben could despise Eubank, he kind of had a moment like, I like him as much as I can. And just the fact that he's like saying that he likes him at any point, or respects him at any point, is an improvement. And they're always going to be born rivals, as they promoted it, right? But this is something where I know that will unite the families together, the Eubank and Ben. I know that as competitive they are, I'm pretty sure by years go on, I mean, they're going to be from sworn enemies to I don't know, an alliance formed between the Eubank-Benn name. Like, it's almost hard to imagine that these two, like Hagler Hearn or Leonard and Hearn, like you see them sit down together, or Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson, right? You see them sit down together and just laugh and crack jokes, and that's just something I just don't see Floyd and Pacquiao ever get into. You know what I mean? But I do feel like Eubank and Ben is something that they can at a certain point. Well, I can't say Floyd and Pacquiao can't, because I've seen it. They've had their moments where but they're still young-ish. They're younger than Ben and Eubank. So, but when all the dust settles, I think they'll be fine. I just don't want to see what I think is the uglier rematch, because these two guys took a lot to make the fight happen. I know they're handsomely paid, but for their health, taking punches from a way bigger fighter, even if he was sluggish, you can see by the end of the fight he looked like he was about to get stopped. And then Eubank's case, early on, he looked like he was going to get stopped. And he just didn't look as fast and as sharp. And to be honest, which I always felt Eubank was going to win because of his size, would be probably the reason why I think he will lose the rematch. Just because how much can he keep doing that to his body, Like, in reality, this should have been a slaughter for Eubank. Like, Eubank should have slaughtered him on normal circumstances. But because of what they have implemented, allowed the fight to be as competitive as it was. So, not taking anything away from the fighters or creating excuses, but I just do feel like if Eubank does take the rematch, I think, he'll put himself in bigger danger than Ben would. Even though Ben is the inexperienced fighter of the two, I think Ben could make adjustments and he can afford to get hit a little bit more than I think Eubank could. If you took the amount of punishment that Ben took and switched it around to Eubank, like Eubank dished out more punishment than Ben did. And when Ben was able to land some good shots, it seemed like it rattled Eubank a little bit more than it rattled Ben. It took Ben in the 11th, 12th round to officially look like he was about to go. But other than that, he was taking those shots like nothing throughout, 8, 9 rounds. So because of Eubank was able to keep Ben off of and was the better fighter and the better boxer, he was able to successfully dominate the fight. And luckily it's almost like a curse to a certain degree by size, because if Eubank was the same size as Ben and he didn't have those same size and same age, I think Eubank would have dominated. But you got an older, compromised fighter, sunk down, versus a young, strong, inexperienced fighter who just fought off of pure instinct and guts at times, not using his IQ, wits as well as Eubank did, created this kind of dramatic fight of the year candidate. So thank God we have MMA or UFC when we get boring boxers like Shakur and Haney. DZ Sanchez says, damn, any pure boxers boring and not worthy on pay-per-view? I mean, are you going to say that about Pernell or Floyd? Or I think it just comes down to taking chances. I think you prefer boxers who decide to take a chance. You could be a pure boxer, but if you're willing to take some chances, I think it always creates excitement. Eubank is too big. Yep, that's why I picked him the first time. But I didn't know how the rehydration was going to work out. So, All right, cool. Perfect. All right, y'all. Yeah, I mean, I'm a boxing fan. I watch everything, man, to be honest. But all right. Appreciate you guys coming in. Daisy, Boys Be Crying. I don't know how to say this. Keyboard name slapped over. Our hand slapped over keyboard. Aaron, Mo Slim, Cash, Cool Q, Ash 87, Mr. S, the Ish, Squid Ink Pasta, Mr. Quake, Great Gambino, Marcus, Corey Lee, Raul, Steven. Appreciate all you guys dropping in. Yeah, Naj is my guy, man. I'm cool with Naj. Yeah, that's my guy, man. He's doing his thing out here, man. He hit me up a couple weeks ago, so we'll probably see each other this week out in New York. So I'm cool with him. That's my guy. So we'll definitely have some stuff in the works. I'll be out in New York and get some coverage this week. So as always, man, I appreciate you guys. I just wanted, like I said, do a quick day after stream just so I can get this out, so I can move on from this, and so we can focus on this week of fights, because there's a lot. Haney, Ryan, Teo, Rolly, Barboza, Ramirez, Canelo, William, Jaime Munguia, Inoue, Rafael Espinoza. I mean, there's so many. There's so many fights this week that one of the Vargas brothers won, I think, last night. Another Vargas, Emiliano's gonna be fighting up right here. What up, Boxio? Hey, yo, Boxio, real quick. I think I seen some of your comments. I don't know if as a name, it's it's all good. I know what you mean. I know sometimes I probably don't enunciate my words, but it's definitely Ron. But I know what you mean. It's where is it? Just help you out. Oh. So, but it's good seeing you, Boxio, man. Big up Chris. He's the one who did the best so far against this dude. Big up Chris. He's the one who did best so far against it. You mean talking about Chris Algieri? Which Chris are you talking about? Oh, bro, don't worry about it. You're good. I already know, man. You're good, brother. Never purchased a Mayweather. Oh, you never purchased one? Really? Never? Canelo, De La Hoya, Pacquiao, nothing? None? Wow. Like none. The Maidana 2 after the Maidana 1? Really? Shane Mosley? What up, GPH? Recommend anyone to watch Eubank-Benn 1 from the 90s. Watch that. Oh, for sure. That's the first one's a classic. Even the second one is, I mean, I thought Ben had a case of winning the second one, so I know they ruled it as a draw. They should be 1-1, but Oh, Chris Eubank. Oh, okay. Bro, I'm tired. I'm sorry. I'm definitely tired. You didn't purchase, so what did you do? Oh, you're talking to to them. Okay. Ryan versus Mario Barrios, or Conor Ben versus Drawn Innocence. I just don't. I'm not gonna lie. I don't want to see Conor and Drawn. Only because I feel like Drawn would destroy him. But hey, make the fight. It'd be a huge fight in the UK. I just think Drawn's just a league above everyone at 147. I'd rather see Drawn at 154. And it's no fault of his own. I just think competitive fights will be when he moves up in weight. I think everyone at 147. I mean, I would favor Jaron Ennis to beat Chris Eubank, especially a compromised Chris Eubank. I think Jaron Ennis would probably stop Chris Eubank. So that's just what I think about that. I think Conor Ben and Brian Norman or Mario Barrios would be good. Ryan Mario Barrios would be interesting. So, all right. But I like Mayweather when he's Pretty Boy and when he fought them. So did you buy the Gotti one then? Because that was his first pay-per-view when he was Pretty Boy. And then he never went back to Pretty Boy. I mean, he was technically Pretty Boy when he fought De La Hoya. Then he turned into Money May after De La Hoya. So, Joe Shipley, what's next for Eubank? They're talking about a rematch. I don't like the idea of it, just only because the fact that he has to get his weight back down. I'm not a fan of the fight, but I think he did probably enter into the Canelo sweepstakes. So I would assume if Canelo would happen to lose to Crawford, Eubank would be a great choice. And if Canelo would happen to win against Crawford, I think that would be a good fight in the UK, just in general, to just continue making money, on and on and on. So I just think Eubank probably would want a Canelo fight. I think he probably gained enough interest from casual fans that even if they favor Canelo, they were at least support it. And I think that's really what it just comes down to it. Just going to the UK market, bring Canelo back over there, and fighting a guy who they just saw perform in front of the biggest bright light. So, I'm not a fan of it because I think Canelo clearly wins that fight. But those are kind of the options that I see. I mean, maybe he fights like Edgar Berlanga. I don't know. But Eubank definitely has a big case that if the rematch doesn't happen, to be in a major fight. I mean, it's hard to imagine that he doesn't get a big fight. That's why I threw in Canelo in there. So, weight classes exist for a reason. If Boots stops at 160 pounder, then who needs to heavily drug test him? That doesn't happen naturally. I mean, people have speculations about Boots. But I can't. I mean, but that's just everyone who. That's not just Boots though. It's like I feel like anyone who is considered way too big for a weight class, that's just how they feel. Like, hey, this guy, how is he able to go down here? That's why Devin gets criticized. That's why Davis gets criticized. That's why, you'll start to hear people. That's why Spence has got criticized. Like, any fighter who is capable of fighting at, Pacquiao, even Floyd, the list goes on. So they've always will speculate. What I mean speculation is that the fact is, like, I'm starting to hear people talk about that because, like, it's not Boots specifically. It's more of the idea of him being so big. And fighters, just like anyone in a profession, they understand the ins and out of an industry. So, like, they're comparing what they go through and they're wondering how on earth is someone else able to do it. So now they're starting to speculate, and their speculation comes from a conclusion of what they might know of other people doing certain stuff, which allowed them to produce the type of results of being a huge fighter, shrinking down to a smaller weight class, and then blowing up, next day and not really having complications. And so that's just the stuff that you'll hear all the time that fighters would say. I'm just not pinning on anybody specifically, but the theory alone has started to kind of, cross over to a guy that they feel is naturally that big of a weight. You know what I mean? And back then there wasn't as many drug testing, so like it's like something where it's more modern conversations that's being talked about. That's all. So, but but yeah, I mean, if he is out there just dominating top 160 pounders, I mean, hear me out. Hear me out. Like Roy Jones, I love Roy Jones to death, but he failed a drug test. He moved out a lot of weight classes. Tony Tarver failed a drug test. James Toney failed a drug test. These are guys that moved up. You know what I'm saying? But I'm not saying it can't be by an accident or can't be by whatever. But it's just kind of like something that's boxing fans kind of understand that these things do exist in the world. So would it surprise me if anything, if certain fighters work with certain people that have not necessarily the best reputation, would you be surprised? But, that's just boxing in the sport. Espinoza wins 10. You talking about Rafael? Yeah. I mean, I heard he's fighting a pretty solid guy, I mean, he's a guy that fought Raymond Forrest, who many people thought he beat him, and Joe Cordina, another controversial fight. So Nick Ball and Espinosa, both dirty fighters. You're talking about how they fight. What Danny Rod, the rematch should happen for sure. It's probably going to happen. And I'm starting to worry about Eubank in the rematch because, you know what I mean? Just, how many more fights like that he can do. They announced a September rematch. They should give these two a break. Just listen to Joe Goose and a FightHype teacher talking about Corrales and Steele and need to have a good gap. Yo, GPH, I literally talked about that. But not that alone, but simply off the fact that you cannot expect a fight like that to go into another fight and expect like someone not being completely destroyed. Like, you have to rebuild them. Like, there needs to be something in between where I'll allow them to kind of get their body back in shape. You know what I mean? Like in good, healthy condition. If you run it back to back, I'm telling you someone is getting hurt. And as much as I picked Eubank the first time, I'm slowly going to lean Ben only because I think his body just was able to recover, is going to recover better. And he won't have to have that rehydration issue. Like, it's just a lot on someone's body to do that back and back. That's like having Ryan Garcia fight Tank and then fight Shakur Stevenson underneath those same circumstances, like back to back, let alone Tank again, right? So Corrales was never able to kind of recuperate from the beating from the Castillo fight. Even though he won, he still took a beating. And I think there was a beating that happened amongst both, but Ben is younger, more youthful. His body wasn't compromised. He just had to move up in weight, in a sense of compromise. But, what up, Mexican boxing? Espinoza stops Edward. Yes, but he's coming down to 126. Edward Vasquez. Yeah, I mean, it should be interesting. I will favor Rafael Espinoza for sure. Last one for me. Should be another classic in UK in 2 weeks. Oh, you're talking about the Woodley fight? Yeah, I mean, look, as much as I am like an American boxing guy, and a lot of the UK domestic fights happen over there, I keep an eye out, out there. You're talking about Lee Wood, not Woodley. You're talking about the Lee Wood fight. I'll definitely keep an eye out on that. Because I know Lee Wood has definitely been in a lot of big fights. He took some punishment throughout. He's definitely a warrior. Anthony. Let me look at his box work really quick. Who is it? He's lost to Martin J. Ward. Who's Martin J. Ward? Okay, that's probably... Oh, he lost to James Tennyson. Okay. So, this guy, he beat Josh... Oh, okay. So, he beat Josh Warrington. He beat Joe Corradino. Oh, okay. Bear with me. I didn't know the name, but I saw him fight. He fought on Riyadh season, and he fought on that Daniel Dubois Joshua card, and he was the one that was kind of schooling Josh Warrington. Yes. I know who you're talking about. That's interesting. I'll definitely check that fight out. Because those two can scrap. Who would you say is the favorite in that fight? GP. Jorge schooled Conwell. I loved it. Yeah, Conwell smothered his punches. Like he definitely smothered his punches a lot. And I don't know. Like I don't know. Like me personally, I didn't think Jorge was going to beat Conwell. I was a little bit on the hype train as well. But when you started watching the fight, you started seeing how sharp Jorge was. And Jorge was on point that night. And Conwell kind of fell into the trap of Jorge. He was setting him up. And yeah, I'm not saying Conwell had a, quote, bad night. I give credit to Jorge personally. I think Jorge actually looked phenomenal. And I think Conwell just didn't make adjustments. So, yeah, it's boxing. You win some, you lose some. Good fight, run it back. The only fight I want to see May 10, top-ranked Navarrete and Saros. Yeah, Navarrete. I mean, Navarrete said that he wants to go up to 135 after that fight Keyshawn Davis, so it should be interesting. I talked to Keyshawn. Keyshawn said he wasn't interested in that fight, which I'm kind of like, why? I get it. You beat the guy that beat him, but go on and fight Navarrete too, man. What? Come on, man. But that's just me. Unless he gets a bigger and better fight than that. So, what's your view on opinion of Shane Mosley himself admitting on tape injecting himself with steroids? I mean, I think he kind of plays. I wouldn't say he admitted that himself knowledgeably, like how he's kind of portraying is like, I was tricked. Like I trust this guy and this guy bamboozled me. That's kind of how he kind of went about it. And he kind of was beating around the bush when he was saying it. I mean, the last time I talked to him about it was when the Ryan Garcia failed his drug test with the Devin. And he started blaming Victor Conti, in that setting and saying that's how he was set up. But it's very interesting because now Shane Mosley is in camp helping Devin and this. So maybe he feels like... yeah, it's so weird. Like it's so entangled because Devin aligns himself with Victor Conti, but Shane Mosley stood up for Ryan Garcia against Victor Conti. But I don't know, bro. It's just a big soap opera, personally. But how do I feel about it? I mean, I'm not a fan of it, but I can't really prove or disprove if he knowingly did it. You know what I mean? It's just only he knows. Bruce Carrington, Nick Ball needs to happen next. J Money. So this is what I talked to Carl Moretti at Top Ranking. He told me that they were trying to get Shushu Carrington versus Stephen Fulton. They reached out to PBC and they wanted to work on that fight. But Stephen Fulton wanted to fight one of their guys, Oshaki Foster. So it seems like Oshaki Foster and Stephen Fulton are going to meet up, potentially on a big card. And then Shushu will fight for the WBC vacant title against Ray Vargas. So, and then if Shushu does win the WBC against Ray Vargas, then there's a huge chance that Nick Ball and Shushu could unify, unless Inoue somehow gets in the picture and Inoue Nick Ball. So, Cacao ducked Nunes. I mean, maybe he can fight Nunes after the Lee Wood fight. So, you said you got Lee Wood? All right. I got Conor Benn and 2F. And, second fight. You got Conor Benn in the second fight? Yeah, I kind of lean that, as much as Eubank won the first fight, that he might come up short in the second. Why do every time Haney Ryan comes up, the Haney fanboys pull the steroids card? But then, again, Oscar knocked out Fernando Vargas, and Vargas also failed a post-fight drug test. Yeah, I think, there's two ways about that. I think when it comes to fighters beating fighters on steroids and fighters losing on steroids is like you always have to give the fighter who lost to the fighter who failed a drug test the benefit of the doubt because they weren't on an even playing field. However, you can have two things at the same time. You can say like that fighter could have potentially had an advantage, hence why they had to remove his win. But at the same time, you can also criticize the other fighter by saying that potentially they could have had a better game plan. So like, for example, like Floyd Mayweather can go fight Canelo toe-to-toe. Toe-to-toe. Like, not even boxing. Go toe-to-toe. In the pocket. Just brawling it out. And Canelo knocks out Floyd. Right? And then they find out Canelo failed a drug test. Right? Well, I'm still going to be like, well, Floyd, hindsight, yeah, that motherfucker was juiced up. But you shouldn't have fought the big man like that. And I think you can have two things. I think Oscar De La Hoya was able to beat Fernando Vargas because I always felt that Oscar had clearly shown that he was the better fighter and he was able to outperform him skillfully. And he was the better guy that fight. He had the better game plan. And even with the advantage that Vargas had, it still wasn't enough. I think when it comes to Devin and Ryan, I think even with or without it, I think it still would have been a potential competitive fight because Ryan seems to be able to land that left hook comfortably with, regardless of, quote, they feel that the steroids would help maybe enhance it. But I feel like if they went 3-3 in the amateurs, I wouldn't be surprised. It's like, look at Lamont Roach and Tank. Like, anytime you have guys that are familiar with each other, there's always potentially going to be some sort of competition. It's the nature of the beast. Shakur and Zepeda, they've sparred each other. We'll see if that fight becomes competitive. I don't think so, but you never know. It just adds on to the history of guys just being familiar with each other and so on. So, I don't know. I just think it's always case by case, unfortunately. And you can't just put like a blanket and say, well, because he did it, it works out this way. No, I don't think it always works that way. I think the steroid situation that they claim, because Ryan, quote, failed the drug test, it's a combination of three things. Ryan failing the drug test, Ryan coming overweight, which they agreed, so he naturally was able to be bigger and not be compromised of cutting weight. And three, I just think that Devin's team didn't have a good game plan. And he admitted to that recently. Like, he took accountability of it. So, Wood also got KO'd by Lara. Yeah, he did. Didn't look like Conwell we've seen in the previous fights. It didn't, but Jorge was definitely like sharp that night too, though. Gary versus Andy and Puello versus Matias, who you got in those fights? I don't know. I have to think about the Andy a little bit more. Puello, Matias, I don't know. I need to put a little bit more research. I might favor Puello because Puello's the boxer and Matias seems to struggle against the boxers a little bit. So, but Gary and Brian are going to get stopped in Japan. This guy. Oh, yes, man. Wood's hometown, nothing should be a good atmosphere. It should be. Yeah, Lee Wood has a huge fan base out there. That stuff when he fought, when Lee Wood fought, was Michael Conlon was crazy. That was crazy. Conwell versus Perez was great. Yeah, I think that was a great fight. Hopefully, maybe they can do a rematch. But if not, I totally understand. There's no reason why Jorge can just move on. Jake Paul versus Julio Cesar Chavez. I got Jake Paul. I'm skipping that, bro. That's a wild question. I talk to these fighters, bro. That's wild. Keyshawn probably doesn't like the fight with Navarrete because he knows he's gonna cook him. I think Keyshawn should fight Raymond Muay Thai. That makes sense. I mean, he's open to that fight. He did tell me that he's more open to fight Raymond Muay Thai. So he didn't dodge the Raymond Muay Thai smoke. He wants that. So, all right, Foster versus Fulton would be a great fight. Nick Diaz, everyone's on steroids. How did you score to Andre Ward Kovalev first fight? I had Kovalev winning the first fight. And I'm a huge Andre Ward fan. Like, I was covering Andre Ward. I was out in the Bay. Like, it could be as biased as it could be at the time where I was, supporting and rooting. You know what I mean? Like I was like in the Bay Area. Like, trust me, it could be super biased by all means. But when I watched it, and I guess this is like where I can tell you guys if I'm biased about something, but I can also be honest with my feelings. It's that feeling where you're like, after the fight was over, you sat there and you watched it and you were like, yo, don't, you ain't baiting me into that, bro. You ain't baiting me into that. Nice try though. You ain't baiting me into that. But when it came to the Ward Kovalev fight, it was the feeling of like a person who was like, damn, I'm about to see this guy take a loss, bro. Oh, that shit sucks. And it was like Andre Ward. I was like, oh, I'll take it, but at the same time, they should do a rematch, is what I thought. And what did Ward do? He gave the rematch. So respect. And when they did the rematch, I thought Ward was actually going to stop him because of the way that the second half of the fight was going. I just didn't think the second fight was going to be competitive, only because of how Ward made the adjustments. But to be fair, I did think Kovalev won the first fight. I just thought those scorecards with the knockdown, I mean, I just thought Kovalev just edged it out. But that's just me. Sugar Nunez stops Fulton at 130 facts. No rematch. That was easy work. Conwell was a hype job. Yeah, I mean, it would be cool of a rematch only because I like to see Conwell get an opportunity. But at the same time, Jorge doesn't really need a rematch. And for what? He beat him. It was obvious. And, he wants to move on to bigger and better things, Can't really hold fighters back from moving on in their career because the guy that was supposed to win didn't win, right? Jorge came in there and he said, okay, you're the guy that's supposed to beat me, then beat me. And he didn't, so. But, all right, y'all. It's a nice, chill Sunday. Like I said, I didn't really want to go too long. I think I've been on here for a little bit over an hour, which is a good sweet spot. So, like I said, just stay tuned in throughout the week. We're going to have a whole bunch of content. I'll be out in New York a little bit for the Devin Haney, Ryan, Teo stuff. And then I'll be going live Friday for it, then live Saturday for Canelo, live Sunday for Inoue. And we'll be breaking everything down and be getting a lot of content. So last one I'll read. GP, on the heavyweight side, I thought Parker should have been given the Usyk bout with Daniel Dubois taking on Caballero. The winners then going toe-to-toe. I feel Joseph Parker has put time and should get a title shot. Yeah, I think Joseph Parker has been on a tear, and I think style-wise, who was I interviewing that sparred both of them? Oh, it was the guy that fought Richard Torres. So if you go watch my interview I did with here, hold on, give me 1 second. It was Guido. When I interviewed Guido Villanillo, he sparred Daniel Dubois and Joseph Parker, and he feels like Joseph Parker, because of the change of size and shape and all that stuff, and the athleticism, the movement, Parker could potentially give Usyk a tougher run. But looking back, the controversial low blow, was it a knockdown, was it belt line, was it not? And now Dubois has went on a tear of like sleeping Anthony Joshua and all these type of stuff. I think either one. I just think it would be nice to see not a rematch, but I get it. It's for Undisputed again. So hopefully if Usyk sticks around, we can get the Parker fight. So, but boys, all right, y'all, man. Stay tuned on FightHype. We got a couple more stuff on its way. Like I said, just a quick little, nice little easy stream just to top off Sunday. And I always appreciate you guys coming and supporting as always. So we got some Robert Garcia that just dropped off right now. And if you guys haven't seen some of the stuff that's been posted, please check out FightHype. And yeah, I agree, Parker versus Usyk all the way. And you guys definitely have a good Sunday, man. As always, man, appreciate you guys rocking with the platform. You guys spending your time, your energy, your views, your likes, your subs to make sure that you keep guys like me employed. So you guys have a good one, man.